I'm going to cover politics, and many of the issues heard from Randy about politics, money, efficiency, the 5-year forward view, some of the changes in primary care that we're seeing, sort of a bit beneath the radar, that are definitely happening, and pick up a few other things, and then I think it's if we have time, a bit exploration about where decisions are going to be made in the new world, because that's a little bit opaque, to be absolutely frank with you, a preview of that. So one of the complexities of the politics is you can't help feeling that, although one person put their hand up, actually the Conservative Party didn't see it coming, and they made a number of promises which probably they're expecting to trade away as part of the coalition negotiations. So that's going to be not many of those in the health area, I think, to be fair. Second thing to say is that while they were saying we've given at least 8 billion, in fact they're claiming at the moment that it's 10 because they've stuck in another 2 in this year to basically prevent the scenario that Andy was talking about the DH part of overspending its limit. But the 8 billion, as I'll explain in a minute, is really just to keep the ship afloat. It won't pay for hepatitis C, all those things with ib and ab on the end that keep being produced. It won't pay for 7-day working. It is basically the let's keep the wolf from the door amount of money. Add to that no one really talks about social care during the election, and it is in a dire state. It's getting worse. It's had 2 billion from the NHS. That transfer will continue, and indeed I suspect strongly that the rhetoric will be we're keeping the NHS budget. We're keeping our promise on the NHS, but increasingly amounts of NHS money will be being siphoned off and put into social care to fill the gap. And of course we've also had this the Cancer Drugs Fund, if you notice, was the tin was kicked down the road to just beyond the election, just a few months before the election. It went up by this enormous amount. So the Cancer Drugs Fund would now basically pay for the entire healthcare of the population of Peterborough. So it's a sizable chunk of money, and it seems to be getting bigger. There are unresolved issues about how that will work, and of course the obvious and glaring anomaly that it only deals with cancer, for which there is no logic other than politics. Right? Apologies to those of you who are in that particular disease area, but that's how it is. Okay, so the narrative now that we saw from Jeremy Hunt in his shirt sleeves looking very confident is, we've given you the money, we've done our side of the bargain, you now need to deliver. In other words, we've given you 8 or maybe it's 10 billion, there's no more money, don't come back asking for any more. Well, we'll see about that, that's interesting. You've now got a £22 billion efficiency target to meet, which we expect you to do, and we expect you to do it while not sacrificing quality and while delivering some of these other things which are on our shopping list where we were a bit vague about the actual funding, like 7-day access in general practice and 7-day working in hospitals, and no doubt lots of other high-profile things as they come along. The Jeremy Hunt theory of change is we set people metrics, it will drive performance. So he's on the search for metrics around integration and around GP quality, and in fact almost anything he can find a metric for. So there's a slight feeling of a return to the Milburn era of if I can set enough targets, the system will respond. It's a perfectly logical approach for somebody who runs a small or medium-sized business, which is what he used to do. It's very questionable about whether this works for something the size and complexity of the NHS. And I think the other bit of the rhetoric is, well, the NHS now are going to make these difficult decisions. Well, we'll see, because actually the Lansley idea that we hand over all the politics, all the difficult stuff to NHS England and the other arm's length bodies, and that they'll then deliver, isn't looking either very credible politically, because blame still comes back to the Secretary of State. It's not fully supported clearly by the politicians who I don't think really ever understood. Only Oliver Letwin ever understood what Andrew Lansley was doing. He was also the only other enthusiast for it, but as they normally keep him locked in a cupboard and don't let him out in public, often that didn't matter too much. So I think we'll see, I think, a bit of tussle and tension between the 6 arm's length bodies who kind of run the NHS now in this kind of odd sort of, it's kind of like some sort of presidium of some sort of minor communist country for me. It's kind of what this really strange arrangement. Any of you who at the NHS Confederation saw the event? It's worth looking at the video. It's on their website. It's very peculiar, and wasn't it? I think it's
world's oldest boy band.
It was very strange, and there was a very interesting dynamic between them. It's not clear they get on hugely well, and it is also very clear who thinks they're in charge. It's not entirely clear all of his colleagues agree with it. So that adds to some complexity, adds some particularly complexity for those of you who perhaps in the past were very used to having someone at the DH that you could talk to about the policy in your disease area or your therapeutic area. Because frankly, well, we'll come to that later. Anyway, so just to put the budget in, Annie's mentioned this, the budget is due to go up by 8 billion. Crucially, what we've not heard is how will that be phased? Yeah. There's been a sort of presumption that that's just going to come in nice, even gobbets over the next few years. There was a hint during the election that that might not be the case, it might be partially backloaded. Backloading is bad news for two reasons. One, well, obvious one is that it doesn't come at the point we appear to be needing it rather badly. And the second is the history suggests that when the NHS gets more money, then it tends to get indigestion and spends it rather badly. And in particular, you get rebound on things like prices and pay. Which has not been very helpful. Just to put this in context, a little calculation you don't normally see is we've done an age-adjusted spending per person. That's why there's no extra money for 7-day working IBS and ABS and Hep C and all the rest, because actually you can see it's virtually flat. You can see what happens if they hold back the 8 billion. We've done a rather extreme scenario there. It won't be that bad, but you can see that the amount of money per person is basically being eaten up by what Andy referred to, which is the ageing and size of the population. Oh, by the way, the slide, those of you who are photographing the slides, Sarah will circulate them later. Yeah, we'll leave them with you. So you can photograph them by all means, but we will also send them out. Okay, so this means 22 billion. Now, much of this is actually about more work for the same money. So it's actually because it's soaking up this additional demand. Some of it, however, will have to be in cash, and I think that's where the challenge has always been. Hospitals particularly, which is where a lot of this burden is going to fall, finding it increasingly hard to cash the savings. So get more patients through a ward or for an outpatient clinic, but it's a lot harder if you say, well, I want to shift the work from A to B and you now need to release the full costs. Without major reconfiguration, you can't really get the costs out. So that's a big challenge, and everyone's sort of ignoring that. It's very big. And I was at a meeting with Simon Stevens. I was facilitating with the chairs of the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, and we were talking about reconfiguration as a solution. And Simon and I were reflecting on the two very big recent ones, which were near Staffordshire and South East London, which between them cost £500 million. And we were reminded, if you were Boris Johnson, you'd be reminded of General Pyrrhus from the Roman Empire, who said, one more victory like that and we're finished. If it costs that sort of money to reconfigure hospitals, and incidentally, in the case of both of those places, still leave them underwater financially, then really, we have an unresolved question there. And I think the atmosphere at last week's Confed was, this is jolly hard and we've no idea how to solve it. And that's a fair summary. So there will be a strong push to reduce costs. So one of the self-inflicted injuries, in the sense that was sort of implied, is you can't get extra productivity, you've capped nurse staffing numbers. So you'll notice in the news a bit of a pushback on whether or not very rigid, whether the staff guidance needs to be looked at again. Lord Warner, you'll have seen in the Sunday papers, not Lord Warner, sorry, Lord Carter, has been publishing Lord Warner, I dare say he's up to something else, but Lord Carter, of course, has been looking at procurement, staffing, staff rostering, the use of agency staff, a range of efficiency savings, and is going to publish an efficiency index which will set out what a model hospital will look like, and that will be used to hold hospitals to account. Now, some of you may remember, I ought to go back and look, but in the 30 odd years I've been associated with the NHS, the number of times I have heard announcements of procurement reviews that are going to produce huge amounts of savings. If all of those reviews have been successful and achieved what they had set out to achieve, many suppliers would now be paying the NHS for the privilege of offloading their stock to them, because but it seems that that these savings, you didn't find that very amusing. Anyway, this is a bit of a nerdy health policy joke, but there is a problem, which is how to enforce this. So I think we will see, however, a bigger push on this than we've seen in the past. Talking about reducing the number of product lines to 10,000 from what's nearly 500,000. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure they're fully taking into account that the NHS is not one business. Even mental health represents probably 10 or so really quite distinct businesses. Orthopaedics is 5 or 6 different businesses, really. Even dermatology breaks down into 5 or 6 quite different things, each with their own requirements. But we'll see whether they're successful. A bit of a hint from Simon about the number of sales reps on site in operating theatres, in waiting to see people outside their offices, and posed as an overhead for which we are paying, is how he presented that. So those of you who've got large representative workforces, well, you might take a cynical view on that, or you might say to someone that don't go in for 3-year leases on their cars. Let's see. Again, some of you will have heard that before, I think, but the enforcement mechanism isn't clear. Okay, so the other big one is reducing variation. I don't know if people have seen the work of Tim Briggs from the British Orthopaedic Association. I keep forgetting what it's called. All these reports have got really stupid names.
Getting it right first time.
Getting it right first time, thank you. Yeah. This guy went round every orthopaedic department. He must have a whole skin like a rhinoceros, and saw all the orthopaedic surgeons and started asking them tough questions about their choice of implants, their infection rates, their length of stay, their management of fracture neck femur. I mean, he must be, fantastic thing to do, actually. I mean, really admirable. And, so big, he's now about to start, I think, on abdominal surgery. Or general surgery, rather. I think we will finally see the NHS saying, do you know what, you need to, and a number of hospitals already, those of you in that devices area, have done that. Bigger push on reducing variation more generally, both in prescribing patterns, in the use of equipment, in variation in cost. Things you can do to help the NHS with that, I think they need all the help they can get. But it's, it's both a threat and an opportunity. Let's be honest. Now, 5-year forward view, very quickly, just to bring you up to speed. Who's read it? All right, it's actually, it's not bad. It's about the same proportion as an NHS audience, interestingly. Slightly worrying, so I think more of them might have read it than you might, than the staff audience might. Okay, so two big chapters, one on prevention, one on new models of care. I'll just quickly mention the prevention one. Andy touched on it. Lots of interest in finding ways to incentivise healthy behaviour. Some hints that NHS England, interestingly, for what is an arm's length body, will start to try and influence policy, for example, on alcohol pricing or sugar in diet. Actually getting into areas which are a little bit outside of its ambit, really, but alongside Public Health England, who presumably will be the one taking the lead on this. Expecting more leadership from local agencies and local government on prevention and exercise, and more targeted prevention. And there's, for example, a model being developed, copied from the US. I suspect this is something that Simon picked up when he was at United, on diabetes control and on short interventions for people who have raised risk, sort of metabolic issues that indicate early signs of impending diabetes. So I think we'll see more of that. A big push on employee health. The NHS perhaps going to think a bit about that a little bit more carefully, and a big push for employers to do something more about workplace health, and probably associated with this a bit of a push on benefits, incapacity benefits and sickness benefits and the like. A lot of stuff on patient education, patient activation, shared decision making, patient peer-to-peer support, increased choice, and more rollout of personal budgets. That with procurement is one of those recurring things of the health policy world. We're always going to have more personal budgets. They never quite seem to arrive. Professionals seem quite resistant to them, but they're very, Simon seems very keen on pushing that. Again, I think the unharnessed power of patients and carers in self-management is something that people really want to harness, and that goes along with well engaging the patient, also engaging carers, the wider community, the use of volunteers, and then the use of this whole area of community development, the use of community assets. Those of you who know the work of John McKnight on how to engage communities using the capabilities that they have. And then finally under here, perhaps the NHS needs to get its own act together, as the number of staff in the NHS who smoke or obese is not impressive. Okay, so the third chapter, interesting, the first chapter is on prevention, the first main chapter in the document is on preventions. They then start talking about new models of care. My slight anxiety with this policy is that the acronyms are quite hard to remember. MCP is a multi-specialty community provider, and similarly there is a thing called a primary and acute care system, PACS. You have to think that an acronym has been worked on to make it actually pronounceable. MCPs are basically, let's abbreviate this quick because we're short of time. They're like US accountable care organisations, except that they focus on a geography and they're built out of primary care. Largely. So they're based on a primary care platform. That implies general practice working together, and I'll come back to this theme later, more federally, in a more standardised way. It also means opportunities to bring specialists, particularly the ologists, and I'll talk about them again in a minute, out of the hospital as part of the group, maybe as equity partners in GP practices or employees of a different organisation. So if you are dealing with diabetologists, respiratory physicians, rheumatologists, you know, I heard one of someone from the Royal College of Physicians refer to as the giblet specialties. The giblet specialties and dermatology and rheumatology, then we may see some significant change. They might run community hospitals. They're certainly going to want to do a lot of their own diagnostics, I suspect, locally, particularly imaging. And they may even have admitting rights in hospital. The idea is over time they'll take a capitation budget for which they will be at risk. They will be doing population health management. This is likely to, perhaps if we think back to fund holding, change some of the mindset of some of the clinical behaviours that go with that. But that's not a quick process, let's be clear about that. Okay, taking a risk budget, technically quite difficult, and it requires a quite big change in your mindset, particularly if you're a specialist. You know, what's the function of an orthopaedic surgeon? Well, in a fee-for-service system, it's to do orthopaedic surgery. In a capitated system, the function of an orthopaedic surgeon is to produce pain-free mobility. Right? That's quite different, because actually then, you know, what Henry Marsh, I don't know if anyone's read Henry Marsh's fantastic book called Do No Harm. He says, you know, the big skill of a neurosurgeon is knowing when not to operate. So this really kicks in here, when you actually start to say to an orthopaedic surgeon, yeah, we know you do knee replacement, but is actually that what your patient really needs? So that's kind of a longer term challenge, but one that certainly increasingly people will need to think about. Likewise, you know, how many patients have getting their HbA1c within the control limits as their key objective, would you say? Not very many. That's not how people think about their objectives. They're thinking in a less biomedical way and a more social way. So there's kind of big shifts in the way that some clinicians will need to see the world. The primary care, acute care system is one that is perhaps more aimed at places where general practice is relatively poor, where you might grow these integrated care, accountable care type organisations out of the hospital system. The endpoint looks quite similar. Third area where there's a lot of interest is in nursing homes. Big 400,000 people in nursing homes. A lot of evidence for bringing them back into the system will have benefits. So doing more shared care, supporting them with telemedicine, training their staff to be better at, for example, using syringe drivers or doing end-of-life care. Trying to get them off as many of the medicines as you can safely. So the number of medicines per person in many care homes is probably far more than is actually giving them benefits. So some optimisation of medicine and other types of support being important. And then there's this idea of creating vanguards, which are sort of pilots, which will do experiments rather than implementing a pre-cooked model that NHS England has come up with. It's quite a different change model from what we've had before. Give them development support so they can generalise, and then this idea of triple integration, primary to secondary health and social care, and bringing the mental health services back into thinking about physical health. 30% of general practice, medically unexplained symptoms, probably 40% of it has got some psychological or etiology, so that's important. How am I doing for time?
You're doing a break?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Better go quicker then. Okay. Changes in emergency care, small hospitals and maternity, and then rebalancing learning disabilities. So what's happening in primary care is just worth mentioning. We all know that the current model of short appointments needs to change, and people are needing to do longer appointments, more care planning, more focus on frailty in care homes, and probably also improving children. So we're going to need to find ways of scaling it up, and we're seeing this happen quite a lot with more diagnostics and more subspecialisation, and this means more standardisation, knowledge management and mobilisation, and I think increasingly we'll see people wanting to do channel shifting. So the productivity improvement is not you see 100 patients every day, and I now want you to see 122. It's actually I want you to see 45. And deal with 60 or 70 on the phone or by the web. So some big changes, and so we're seeing this scaling up primary care under the radar. I expect you'll see this happening very quickly. Similar changes, I refer to this with some of the ologists in terms of giving advice, helping to manage patients across transitions, having to think about fixing non-health problems. A lot of people with COPD, their problem is not, it's also their lifestyle, where they're living, their other comorbid conditions. And so ologists becoming more part of multidisciplinary teams supporting primary care and helping the primary care colleagues keep up to date with the science. Just a few other things that come out from all of this. More horizontal networking. We're not going to be able to have all the specialists in all the hospitals in future, increasingly seen, particularly in some of the surgical specialties, so people are going to need to horizontally network. A lot of the focus in the current policy debate is on vertical integration and vertical networking, but actually we're going to have to see small hospitals collaborate more, and the small hospital vanguards that Andy referred to will be doing that. They'll be getting the smaller hospitals connecting to each other and sharing expertise. A big emphasis on data and analytics, trying to predict. There's a story in today's Daily Mail about how terrible this is and how what the breach of confidentiality is to try and actually find patients that one could help better. Disgraceful. The Daily Mail's disgraceful. Not that initiative, but more proactive and preventative care. I think this other theme of we keep inflicting injury on ourselves by creating guidance, standards and regulation that increases costs, and I think we'll see some rowing back on that. We'll see a shift. I mean, it's all about quality, but you also have to do the money too. Actually, the money's really important. So, and finally, who do you talk to? Who makes decisions in all of this world? Well, good luck with that. I haven't got a huge amount of advice for you on that. It's really not very clear, and of course it depends on what your area of interest is, but even areas like specialist commission, where you would have thought there's quite a clear responsibility. It's not clear who to talk to. It's not clear that the person you'll talk to will know about the topic that you're talking about. So years ago, you might talk to the person who was really interested in cardiology at the Department of Health. It would be someone who really knew about cardiology, or mucopolysaccharidosis or whatever. Not anymore. Expertise is spread very thin. Decision rights are not clearly demarcated. The pattern of co-production, co-decision making and devolution makes it extremely difficult. You're probably going to have to spread yourselves much thinner and spend a lot of time explaining things to people who in the past might have understood more about what you were talking about. So good luck.